Coming up on today's episode.
One property I actually bought in WA, they left a bed.
Oh,
Just a mattress stuck outside. Having that property manager already online to support you, if you find a really good property manager, they will go above and beyond to firstly help you get that property settled.
Yeah.
And then they will support you in finding the right tenant.
Dodgy advice and bad decisions can cost you big in real estate. We're here to make sure that doesn't happen. Welcome to the No BS Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Agresta, and it's time to take control of your property journey together.
Hi there, my name is Tim Watson. I'm the founder of Bricks to Wealth, property strategist and buyer's agent. So absolutely thrilled to be here in Seaforth on the No BS podcast. And today we're looking at due diligence and how crucial it is to get it right, because it can cost you thousands if you get it wrong.
Welcome back, everyone, to the No BS Real Estate Podcast, your listening how-to guide to the Aussie finance and real estate market. I'm your host, Joe Agresta. Now, on today's episode, we are welcoming back Tim Watson. Tim Watson is the founder and buyer's advocate, a property strategist as well, at Bricks to Wealth. And his first episode, we unpacked the first big property decision, getting started, choosing between buying your own home or investing first, understanding advice, and avoiding some of the common traps investors can fall into early. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and check it out. It's already live and it was such a great conversation. So good, in fact, that we wanted to bring him back now that we're sitting here at Seaforth, New South Wales. So today's conversation, we're going to take it a step further, because once you've decided what you want to buy, the next question becomes, how do you make sure you're not buying the wrong thing? And that brings us to one of the most misunderstood parts of property investing, due diligence. Because a lot of people think they've done due diligence just because they've looked at a suburb profile, they've checked out a couple of comparable sales, maybe they've had a property report given to them by their broker, they've watched a few videos, or they've just found something that supports the decision they already wanted to make. But proper due diligence is not just finding reasons to buy, it's also looking for reasons not to buy. So today we're going to unpack what due diligence actually means, what investors commonly miss, and how to avoid nasty surprises, and how to pressure test a property properly before you commit. And to break us down, it's Tim. Tim, welcome back.
Joe, brilliant to be here. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, of course. I've been so excited to bring you onto the show. Again, like I said, our first conversation was a lot of fun, packed with value. It's actually got a lot of plays.
Brilliant. That's great to hear. I hope it was useful.
I think it's been very useful. So we're getting a lot of good listener feedback. And then that was just more confirmation for me to say, okay, well, I'm going to Sydney. Can we make this work?
Great to meet you in person. And hey, Seaforth is a place to be. It's a lovely little area.
Oh, it's very nice. And I don't know Sydney that well. So when I picked it, I asked our videographer actually, who's based here, I said, where should I go? And he goes, Seaforth's pretty nice.
It is.
He didn't disappoint.
No, it's spot on.
Spot on. Tim, just a quick reintroduction to yourself, for anyone that might have missed your first episode. Can you give us, the quick version of who you are, what you do, and the kind of investors that you typically work with?
Yeah. So, look, I think we talked about in that first episode, my background is having come from a corporate life, having done over 20 years working in pharmaceutical. I then followed my passion to set up Bricks to Wealth. And that was all based on my experience of investing while I worked in corporate. And I think, as we talked about, my goal was to take control of my retirement. And I thought, and I've always believed, property is an amazing way to do that. So having done it myself, having used buyer's agents myself, I then retrained, and I've now, essentially, I help other people do hopefully what I've achieved as well.
I really love that. And for those of you that are listening going, oh, that sounds interesting, go back to episode 1, because Tim's story is super interesting. He's been in that position. He had the same hesitancy about using a buyer's advocate himself. Now he's one himself and he sees the immense value, and he's just, he's incredible. His story is awesome. So go have a listen if you haven't already. But I'm really glad we could bring you on because we were talking about the direction for this episode too, and we were kind of floating ideas. And you mentioned so naturally, you said, well, the next natural progression here is due diligence and how people get it right, get it wrong. How do we get it right? And it's one of those terms that everyone uses, I feel, but they don't actually, they don't think everyone I don't think they actually understand what it means in practice. I feel like there's a lot of bias around it. So before we get into those details, we're going to kick off with today's no BS statement. For those that are new around here, we always throw out a bit of a saucy, spicy statement. And then by the end of the episode, we're going to have Tim decide whether that is bullshit or not bullshit. So today's statement is, most investors don't do due diligence. They do confirmation bias. So we're not going to answer that yet. We'll come back at the end and we'll see what Tim reckons. But Tim, I guess first place to start is, what is due diligence? What does it actually mean? So when investors say they've done their due diligence, what do you think most people actually mean by that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's often misunderstood unless you live and breathe property. For me, due diligence is trying to minimize risk whenever you're purchasing a property. And look, at the end of the day, you can only minimize it. You cannot take away all the risk whenever you purchase. But there are definitely ways to minimize it. And it's the sort of decision that can literally cost you tens of thousands of dollars if you get it wrong. So, look, I think we often, and me myself, you can buy very much based on sort of emotion, but you've got to strip away that emotion when it comes to making sure you're purchasing the right asset.
And it's hard to do that because emotions take over, right? You see a property, you start to picture your life, or you start to picture, even as an investor, the financial gain. If you think that the due diligence is like, weighing towards what you want it to do for you, that's where you start to get into that trap of, okay, maybe I'll just accept the fact, like you accept more risk than actually calculating the risk.
And I think there's a number of different factors that can lead to that. One is, for instance, if you missed out on a whole load of properties, you start to get more desperate about trying to get into the market and purchasing. That can sometimes lead to making the wrong decision. Equally, if you're in a hot market, sometimes you might have, it might be the real estate agent, it might be a buyer's agent, it might be someone who's pushing you to move fast. Now, moving fast is important, but if you don't do the due diligence at the same time, it can result in very poor outcomes.
Yeah, I have to agree. And I think in your view, let's talk about that, that proper due diligence. And this is what we're here to discuss today. Like, if I had to look at this, proper due diligence actually could include, I guess, before someone buys an investment property, what steps do they need to take at that point? Like, how does this kind of play out for you?
Yeah, and I think due diligence can come in a whole variety of different forms, and we will get down to property level due diligence, which is essential. When you're thinking about the market due diligence, first and foremost, you have to have a good reason to why you're investing in a suburb. And so understanding data, things like population changes, infrastructure that's going into a market, supply versus demand, affordability, these are all metrics that you really should understand to determine why you're going to purchase in one particular suburb.
That's so true.
So that in itself is just the analysis that anyone should do to figure out why one market's going to outperform over another. And you've got to get that bit right first. Even before that, something I spend a lot of time with clients on is the strategic part. So you mentioned, look at, first and foremost, I'm a property strategist as much as a buyer's agent. The property strategy stuff is all about understanding what a client's individual goals are and how you can ultimately get there as fast as possible. And so for me, I think unless you have a path as to what you're trying to achieve, you're sort of flying in the dark.
It's true.
So you've got to get the strategy stuff right. You've then got to understand the market. But then when it really comes down to the property level, there's a whole variety of due diligence that you need to do.
And that's this is exactly what we're going to break down in later in this episode. We've got exactly those different types of due diligence at different stages. But what you've just explained there is so true. It's the strategy has to come first, understanding not only what they want to achieve, but you start with the goal, and then your job, what you do to help your clients is you work backwards from there. You
Correct.
go, right, let's go all the way back to square one.
Yeah.
Why?
What I realized, and certainly this is what I lived when I first started investing in property, is I didn't have a clear goal. I knew I had to take control of my retirement, and I knew property was going to be a great way to get there.
Yeah.
But did I know exactly what passive income I was trying to achieve? No. Did I understand what sort of time frame I wanted to work to? Well, I knew I wanted to retire by the time I was 50. That was my ideal goal.
Yeah.
Sadly, I'm already past that. However, I am now doing what I absolutely love. So in many respects, I wouldn't have been able to make this transition without the portfolio behind me that I now have.
Yeah.
So for me, it was life-changing.
Of course.
Investing in property has allowed me to do what I love. I find most people have no idea as to how many properties they need to get to where they want to get to. So you've got to align on that first. And for many people, if you buy the right 3 to 5 properties, that can absolutely set up a passive income of, it might be 100,000, 150, 200,000, depending on where you want to get to.
Yep.
In today's money, that can be life-changing when it gets to retirement.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And I couldn't agree more. And like, this is a great episode for those of you that are thinking about that long-term like wealth and financial freedom or that retirement planning kind of stage, but also for you guys that are just getting into the market or, you know, wanting to set up that first foundational property. Like, this is exactly why we have these discussions on the show, because this suits so many different kind of buying pools and stages of life. So in your view, I guess, what does proper due diligence look like before someone buys an investment property, if you had to kind of summarize?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start at overall suburb level.
Yeah.
There are some very basic levels of due diligence that you absolutely must do. So flood mapping is crucial. I mean, hey, we live in Australia. There are areas such as Townsville, which has been a very hot market for a long, long time.
Sure has.
There are pockets of Townsville which literally can be underwater when flooding occurs. And I think it was early last year we had another flood event. So anyone that got into the market a couple of years ago, tragically, there will be people that probably didn't do the due diligence where that will massively affect that investment property, the value of it, the ability to sell it. And so it sort of goes against everything you're trying to achieve, which is wealth creation.
Correct.
So flood mapping is definitely a crucial one. And it's not that difficult to do. Many states, many areas provide flood maps.
Yeah.
If you're using something like a buyer's agent, they absolutely have access to tools that will enable you to look at the flood zones in that area and how close they are to a property.
100%.
And so that's essential due diligence I do for every client, is to share with them a report that has flood mapping.
Yep.
The other key one is bushfire zones.
Oh, yes.
Obviously, you want to make sure you're not buying in anywhere that could be affected by bushfires.
No.
So those two fundamental ones I would certainly look at from a suburb level.
Yeah.
But then obviously get down to property level as well. Like, for instance, you could have a property, like I say, Townsville might be flood affected. If you're on the higher parts of Townsville, your property is never going to be affected. So that's the kind of
due diligence
that you want to do.
See, so this is important, right? The suburb level, sometimes there's all this, what you're really referring to here is risk mitigation. It's the risk you're willing to take. And that's what due diligence is. It's knowing what the risk is and then consciously making that choice of saying, I accept, or no, that's not for me.
Exactly.
So it's really interesting. And from that suburb level, like you said, working with advocates, we pay for a lot of data systems. Just to let you know, the subscription levels that we will go to purchase data to make sure that we have checked every box. Like, that's part of the service that you get, and we're checking for all these things, because at the end of the day, you're engaging someone like Tim to buy your property. He's not going to sit there and just say, oh, cool, yeah, just pay me and we'll wing it. He's going to make sure he's buying that absolute right asset for you.
But I'm talking from personal experience.
Correct.
So look, I don't mind sharing an example. I bought a property back in 2020, just around when COVID hit. So it's very interesting timing. At the time, being completely unaware of really what I should be checking, I didn't look into the flood zone areas. I just knew I was getting a great deal on the property, and no doubt I got a fantastic deal. It's still in my portfolio. Now, that didn't used to be considered a flood zone. Unfortunately, as of a year or two ago, they had flooding in that Beenleigh region, and that property is now affected.
Yep.
So this is why I love the word you use around risk mitigation. You can never completely remove the risk. Unfortunately, with climate change and other things are changing, but you can definitely limit it. And so even though that current property sits within a flood zone, it has never been flood impacted, but I just now need to be aware that if I ever want to try and sell that in the future, there will be people that just won't be interested in it because it now sits in a flood zone.
That's right.
So it's just something to be aware.
Exactly. But I love the way you've got that measured approach about it because, I guess where do you see the biggest gap between what buyers think they've checked and what they've actually checked?
So I think there's a huge difference between people that have no experience in buying property
Mhm.
and people that are educated and perhaps have a portfolio and are building on that. You are more likely, if you already own a investment property, you're more likely to know what process you should go through from a due diligence perspective. Flood, bushfires are just two key areas. I never buy for clients on a main road because I think it impacts the potential value add that you will get. You obviously would never buy with electricity lines anywhere nearby. So simple things. But personally, part of my due diligence I do is I never buy a property that has a pool.
Oh, please explain, because I feel like everyone listening is like, what?
Yeah. So look, we live in Australia. Oh, surely having a pool is a great thing, quality of life.
100%.
Not if you're an investor.
No.
If you are buying, and okay, this is the difference between owner-occupier and investor. But hey, I've got some mates who own a pool, and it has been an absolute nightmare for years. That thing seems to be emptied and refilled more than I've had hot dinners recently.
Oh my God.
It's a nightmare. But from an investment point of view, it's a money pit.
Yeah.
So the cost of maintaining it,
Refilling it, managing it.
when I'm helping clients build a portfolio that is meant to add money into their pocket over time, a pool is something that I avoid.
Yeah, right.
So that's just one example. So yeah, look, I think that the only other key thing I think is level of public housing.
Oh, that's a very big one amongst advocates.
Because again, I'm looking at all the dynamics that are going to maximize capital growth over time. In my opinion, and I think that there's good data to support this, if you buy in an area that has a high level of public housing, even if it's close by, it can impact the ability to grow the capital growth over time. So once you start layering over all these different things, you've done your flood check, it's not bushfire affected, not on a main road, don't have a swimming pool, not in a public housing area, you start to maximize your chance of getting good capital growth. And if you've chosen the right suburb and then the right property within that suburb, again, it's just, you're doing everything you can.
Well, I want to call to attention something you mentioned before, right? It's like you said, in parts of Townsville, like there's a big flood kind of, risk overlay there. But then if you go to the higher points of that, they're not affected. There's micro suburbs within suburbs. There's pockets. And just because you might know a suburb and have labelled it shit for whatever reason, maybe it's low socio-economic factor, but maybe in a pocket of that suburb, it's not like that. How much do you think that is that a factor into your due diligence?
So you have to know. So it's one thing to say a particular suburb is a great place to invest. You have to know where to buy within that suburb. It's why I avoid areas that have high level of public housing. There might be a segment of that suburb that I would not invest in. There might equally be another part of that suburb, which is an amazing place to invest. Now, I myself have made a number of investments in what would be termed relatively low socioeconomic areas, but the performance over time has been brilliant. And very rarely have I had any issues with tenants. So it's just about trying to make as many educated choices as you can based on the data, based on the analysis. Again, you can never 100% minimize. You can't remove the risks.
Correct.
Minimize it.
No, and that's well answered, which brings me into, I guess, those layers of due diligence we've been talking about. So, you've broken down that suburb level, right? And I want to talk about the difference between the market due diligence now, the property due diligence, rental due diligence, and financial due diligence. These are all different factors. Now, for those of you listening, I just want to say to you, don't get overwhelmed. I know it's a lot. Tim is the perfect person to break this down because he's very measured in how he approaches this and very strategic, might I add, about how he answers it. I had to throw that in because it's true. This is why I thought you'd be a really good fit. Can you break down, let's go market due diligence. So this is more of that suburb level that we just covered, correct?
Correct.
So then if we go into property due diligence, now what are we looking at? Yeah,
so property due diligence, it's all of that above, but you're getting down to there are elements of things that you can do that are going to, again, further remove risk. So firstly, you will always see photos, realestate.com, domain, etc. You will always see photos of a property. You should always ask for a video walkthrough.
Yep.
And a recent video walkthrough. Because what you're then going to see is how the actual house looks right now, any issues that might already be there that weren't captured on the photos. Real estate agents pay photographers good money to try and make the property look great.
It's true.
But they can cover over a lot of cracks. And so at least a video walkthrough, again, it's not going to completely remove any risk, but you will see the property as it currently stands. So I would always ask for that.
Yep.
The building and pest inspection is a fundamental element to minimize risk. And that's obviously at property level. Now, I am yet to look at a building and pest inspection, which doesn't scare the crap out of me.
God.
Literally, every time you look at this thing, there's issues across the board. But that's it's partly what the building inspector's meant to do.
Yeah, of course.
But it's also them that they are covering themselves at the same time. They're trying to flag every possible issue with the place. Now, what you then need to do is really work through what are the important elements within it. So you've got major and minor issues.
Yep.
Major would be structural. For
Correct.
instance, you've got major structural issues with the property. From a pest perspective, you might have a termite infection.
Oh, which would be the worst option.
That's right. I'm not sure termite infection is quite the right word.
Infestation.
Infestation is the word I'm looking for.
If you end up with an infection from it, that's what will happen.
That sounds even worse. You can have areas that have sort of historical issues.
Yes.
And you can then run further tests to make sure that's no longer a problem. That might be a negotiation factor you might then purchase. But yeah, the T word always scares me a little bit. So I generally don't get too close to anything that's got termite.
Well, I think that's like in those like water areas, like beachfront, that's where all that risk kind of lives. And it can be so risky and scary.
Absolutely. But I guess my point with the building and pest inspection is you need to be able to filter out the good and the bad is.
Yeah, 100%.
And the other key thing is I am yet to find a building and pest inspection that doesn't enable some negotiation. Because you look at it, and if there's a whole load of minor issues, you might be able to go back to the vendor and say, okay, to fix this and this, either you fix it before we settle, or you allow some money off the purchase price. So a building, obviously it costs money, but it can be a brilliant way to actually negotiate a better price on a property.
I agree. That's so true.
Yeah. So that, I think, an essential part of a property level element of due diligence is always do a building and pest inspection.
Yeah.
On this note, what I'd say is there's a couple of things. One is building and pest inspectors, similar to real estate agents, similar to buyer's agents, they're not all the same.
Correct. It's like who you pick matters.
And so always try and get a referral.
Yep.
If you're using a buyer's agent, I tend to, within one area, I will find a building and pest inspector that I think does a fantastic job, is very, very thorough. And that then gives me confidence. Then when I work with a client, I always say, this is the building and pest inspector that I would recommend.
Yeah.
And then I will always review the report and sit down with the client and say, okay, this is either a yes or a no go. And here's how we move forward. I
agree. And with building and pest in particular too, if some of you that are listening today have never gone through this, when you get the report, what Tim said was accurate. You're going to get a list of every possible problem, right? If the building and pest inspector is worth their salt in what they do. But what's good about it is they tell you how to fix it as well, the recommendation on how to solve that problem. And they're very brutal. When you have the relationship with a buyer's advocate, I find that when I used to work with building and pest, they would be very candid with me and go, don't buy it. It's horrendous. Structurally, there's this big problem, and it's something that you can't see. When you walk in, there's nothing that, with my eyesight, that I picked up on that kind of tipped that off. It's like, and they'll be really brutal with us and say, it's not a good buy.
Perfect example, a property that literally settled last week for a client. Photos looked great. This is a building and pest inspector I work very closely with and have used multiple times. And they went in there and I spoke to them afterwards and they said, Tim, the state of cleanliness in this place is shocking. It's just dirty. The blinds are dirty. Carpets need steam cleaning. Now, for some people, you might look at that and think, oh, well, there's no way I can purchase it. We took a different approach, which is we renegotiated around the price. And we also then looked at getting the carpet steam cleaned.
Yep.
properly cleaned as part of the settlement process.
Nice.
So, and other things needed to be fixed as well.
Of course.
So, there's always a different way, but again, it's that relationship I've got with that inspector. I trust what that person's going to tell me. And so therefore, at the end of the day, all I'm trying to do is make sure my client gets the absolute best outcome.
Correct. And what you did with that approach is, I think a lot of buyers who don't have support think, I either I'm committed because I'm settling. So they kind of say this sucks. They try and fight it. They don't get anywhere because they don't know exactly what to say or how to approach that situation. Or they fight so hard to get it changed that it doesn't work in their favor or it turns worse. And this is where relationships among professionals are very different in how we can tackle it on your behalf.
And so in this particular case, we hadn't signed the contract yet. So at the last minute, we got the contract changed to stipulate these elements were going to be included, the steam cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that also brings me on to building and pest inspections state by state.
Yes.
And what you can do. There are some states which are, like, let's take Queensland. Buyer friendly from you have a finance clause, you have a building and pest inspection clause. Within Queensland, you can pull out if you're not happy with the building and pest inspection. That can be because of major issues. It can also be because of minor issues. In Victoria, completely different. The only way you can pull out of a contract for building and pest is major structural issues or termite infestation, I think we worked on. So, infection, not so good.
No.
So,
you could get one.
You could. So, I think you have to understand when you're buying state by state, all states have very different approaches. And so if you are experienced in buying property, hopefully you can do it yourself. You can understand that and you have a good solicitor that supports you. Again, I think that's one benefit of using a buyer's agent is someone who's buying nationally.
Correct.
Who understands all of these state by state sort of implications of purchasing and who can support you every step of the way.
I couldn't agree more. And I guess like that property level due diligence and building and pest, the reason there's so much focus on that is because that's often the deal breaker for a lot of properties. Like when you go to property level due diligence, once you've worked out the suburb and the market, what we've already talked about, it's kind of like, okay, well, where's that right property within that suburb? You find out that micro suburb within it. You find the right property that meets obviously the criteria and the growth metrics that you need it to make. But then where it can fall down is that building and pest. Do you see any others that are similar?
So just on that point, because I think you can use the building and pest inspection to your advantage. As a strength and certainly to your advantage. So for some clients, because of purchasing in Victoria, for instance, if you can actually get the building and pest inspection done before you sign the contract and you're comfortable with it, you can then remove a building and pest clause. If you're in a strong financial situation, you might even be able to remove the finance clause.
Yeah, that's true.
In which case, you can go in with an unconditional offer. From my experience, any agent and vendor is going to love an unconditional purchase.
Oh, yeah.
Over and above anything that comes with any clauses because they know it's essentially a done deal. So this is where strategically, if you understand the state, you understand how a building and pest might work in your favor, you've got the right contact so you can get the building and pest done very, very quickly.
That's important.
It can actually really work in your favor.
I actually agree. I like that take on it too. And, going into, I guess, when you're assessing the actual property, what are some of the things that I guess investors, when they're working by themselves, overlook because they're too focused on price? Because I find that a lot of, investors that are not using a professional, it's all about the price, cheap as possible. Where do you think they're going wrong?
Look, I think just as we've spoken about, I think overall, if you try and move too quickly to the detriment of not doing all your due diligence, bad things can happen. You might think you're getting a great deal, but then over time, what you'll realize is, unfortunately, you didn't do the due diligence, therefore things catch up with you, whether it's a flood, structural, too many minor issues within a building and pest.
It's a number of things.
There's a number of things, and it can actually, even though you might think you purchased well, the cost involved, the ability to rent out the property.
Yeah.
These can all come back and bite you.
I couldn't agree more. And you know, I guess how important is, like, if we go on the other side now, this is what I find interesting that I think a lot of people don't think about, that don't use a professional, and it's rental due diligence. So not just what the property might rent for, but who the tenant pool is, what they look like, how stable the demand is in a given area, and what could affect cash flow. Because ultimately, we talk so much about finding and buying the asset, but then we miss out on the very important step, which is, well, how's that asset going to work for you long term? And this is where rental due diligence is a big ticket. So can you talk us through that?
Yeah, and look, it's a great point, Joe. So ideally, you are going to purchase in a market that has a low vacancy rate. And the reason that's so important is, if there's a low vacancy rate, as properties come on market for rental, they're getting snapped up quickly.
Yep.
So you don't have properties sat there for 30 days, 60 days, etc. A low vacancy rate implies that there is a high level of demand, and that's going to enable you, firstly, to rent quickly and hopefully not have any downtime. But secondly, as long as that vacancy rate stays low over time, you should be able to increase your rents over time faster than in another area where the vacancy rates are higher.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking about, and by the way, I need to say I'm not a financial advisor.
Of course.
What we're talking about is using property to build wealth. And equally, many clients want to build a passive income over time. The ability to ramp up your rent over time is a really important factor in that. What have recent properties like that actually rented for? One thing I know is, I will always ask the agent for a rental appraisal as to what they think it's going to go for. But you can't just trust that.
No.
You have to go away. You have to look at recent rentals that have actually gone out and what they've gone for. Because it's a bit of a sort of fine line. You want to maximize your rent, but you don't want it sat there for ages. So it's finding that balance.
And it's a great point. And this is something that, if you're not using like an advocate, if you go to realestate.com and you search for rentals and you look at rented instead of for rent, you're going to find out very quickly where the renting is actually happening and what it's going for. And those are the comparisons you can use as a tool to kind of scan your due diligence a little bit.
And I would definitely look at what has actually already rented, how long did it take to rent, and what's actually on the market now.
Yes, very important.
The other factor is obviously level of building approvals. If you have a high level of building approvals coming online in an area over the next 12 months, that may change the amount of stock that you have within that market.
True.
So it's just another layer. You've got to look at the supply, demand, what's happening in that suburb that could affect your ability to rent that property out over time.
Yeah, I really actually like that answer. That's very well said too. I guess this brings me to, the next segment, which is what investors actually miss before they buy. So what are some of the common things that investors miss before signing a contract? Like, I think this is a very important step. Like, not so much the due diligence side of finding things. It's those little 1%ers that stuff them up right before signing a contract.
Look, there's nothing specific that springs to mind, but I think this is where having a good solicitor that's supporting you along the journey, if you've done everything that we've talked about, you've done your market due diligence, you've got down to property level due diligence, you've got your building and pest inspection done, I think, or by that point, hopefully you have mitigated
most of the risk,
a lot of the issues, a lot of the risk. Then you, like, for instance, I gave you the example of the one where we've written into the contract that the place has to be steam cleaned, carpet steam cleaned, and then properly cleaned throughout. One thing I've then done is put that client in touch with a local property manager, and she has actually gone in to do a pre-settlement inspection.
Wow.
And can actually say, okay, now in this particular case, there was a whole lot of rubbish left outside. There were still some things that particular owner had left in the house. So we had to go back to them pre-settlement and say, you still need to action these things.
Jeez.
One property I actually bought in WA, they left a bed.
Oh,
just a mattress stuck outside. Having that property manager already online to support you, if you find a really good property manager, they will go above and beyond to, firstly, help you get that property settled.
Yeah.
And then they will support you in finding the right tenant, understanding what the right market rent is. So I guess that 1% you're referring to, having a great property manager to support you can really, really, again, minimize sort of any risks you might have.
And I think, being able to kind of have that property manager lined up before you kind of do
Absolutely.
anything at settlement, in particular, like the final inspection stage, that's really gold. That's a gold tip. I don't know of a lot of people that would think that far ahead, because normally they'll start either the real estate agent at this point who sold you the property will start saying to you, you can manage the rental with us, right? Because that's the natural progression. So they'll say, come and bring your property over. We'll start managing. And they start doing all this stuff on your behalf. Now, in your mind, that might be really convenient. You've purchased off that office. They get the rental back. This is the transaction and the ecosystem for them. But you got to do your due diligence too on the actual property managers. You know, is that the right property manager? No.
And don't get me wrong, the percentage they charge is important.
Correct.
The quality of service they offer is even more important.
Yeah.
And their ability to look at what the right market value is, go above and beyond to support you, whether it's pre-settlement and obviously post-settlement. One thing I've always found with property managers is that they do tend to take the easy approach when it comes to rental renewal.
Yeah.
So most people will only ever recommend a small increase. My guidance to any client is actually do your own due diligence on what the rental is, look at what similar properties renting for, and try and keep it at market rental. Because over time, if you're doing that, again, you're maximizing your passive income over time. It gets you quicker to a neutral portfolio. And then hopefully by the time you get to retirement 30 years from now, you've maximized your rental. So that's the one thing I would certainly say when it comes to reviewing your rents, do your own due diligence and challenge your property manager around what a decent rental would be.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's the property management side is where I say it's key, because that's going to be your wealth creation tool. Like post all the purchasing, you need to have that right. And if you get that wrong, you can change hands, but you'd rather get it right from the get-go. And is that something that you help your clients with as well during that post-purchase process or right at the end?
Absolutely. So look, and this is, I guess the way I work, Joe, is very much governed by my experience of having built my own portfolio and having used buyer's agents and being very transparent. I've had good experiences, but I've also had some not so good experiences using buyer's agents. So that now very much informs how I work. For me, it's very much an end-to-end service. It's right from the property strategy element, understanding the client's goals and then building a unique plan for them, right through to, I want to make sure that tenant or that client can get a tenant in as quickly as possible. So to do that, I put them in touch with a property manager that I trust in the area where we've purchased. I then work with that property manager to make sure that they're supporting my client. And hopefully that's a seamless process.
It's true. It's the whole goal, right? I think that's a big part of that. And I guess, are there certain, on the flip side to this, are there certain property types or situations where you think buyers need to be extra careful? Like, I know you've mentioned a lot of like those, the flood and bushfire risks and things like that. But is there any like situation where they're kind of getting themselves into a bit of hot water?
This is my personal experience and personal preference. I don't buy units for clients.
Interesting.
I only buy houses. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is I believe that it's the land that appreciates over time. The building itself depreciates. So I think the land component is an essential part of building wealth over time. And to answer your question, the other key issue I see with buying units is obviously the strata component. First, I think we talked about this in the first episode. My first ever investment was a Gold Coast unit.
That's right.
Which I have now sold very recently.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you. Now, I didn't realize at the time, like you see the initial yield and you think, well, that's going to be fantastic. But by the time the strata, the insurance and everything else is eaten into it, your yield is massively different from the original. But the other thing that concerns me, and we hear about this more and more in the news, things like extra special levies that can come with owning a strata building.
Yeah.
So I actually know a friend's mum who's currently been hit by an extra special levy of $40,000.
My God.
like, where do most people suddenly find $40,000?
Yeah.
And, we talk about due diligence. If you are, and by the way, I do fully understand that for many people getting into the market, buying a unit is the stepping stone to get into the market. So I
Correct.
absolutely understand many people have to buy a unit. There's an extra level of due diligence that really, really needs to be done. You need to understand the strata, what the actual funds look like within the strata, what work's been approved. Obviously, any strata has a committee that will approve works to be done, whether it's repainting stuff, rebuilding work, whatever. You really, really want to get hold of a report of what the current strata financials look like and know if anything's actually going to be coming up.
I actually love that point because it's different depending on the size of the unit block too, right? It's like
absolutely.
If you end up in an apartment complex, different kettle of fish, but even some bigger unit complexes that have like 20 plus, the body corporate or the owner's corporate, the strata corporate, like whatever they're using, it can be so different with their inclusions, how it works, what's covered, what's not covered, and then you've got the fees attached to it. And some areas charge, like if you go to an affluent suburb, those fees are in excess sometimes of, at least you're looking at 7,000 plus a year on just strata. And then when you go down to like a smaller three block apartments, you'll find something a little bit more manageable. It'll be about much cheaper, much less risk. But again, this is all part of that due diligence. You got to really know what you're getting.
And it's just, for me, it's just an extra level of due diligence anyone buying a unit would need to do.
Yes.
And again, it's that bait of, look, for a lot of properties, and particularly in a hot market, is the balance of you need to move quickly to secure it and not keep missing out on properties, but never to the detriment of not doing the appropriate due diligence.
No, spot on. I think that's the fundamental message that we're trying to get out today. It's the due diligence means a lot when purchasing. You can't discount it, and you have to know what are you willing to accept as a risk or not accept. Correct. And make those property decisions. Because I imagine I've seen buyers like this, it's very normal for you guys or anyone purchasing. It seems overwhelming. Like, this is why I bang on about using a professional. But if you're in the camp of, I'm still not convinced, Joe, I've listened to your podcast, I'm still going to try and give this a crack, I totally get it. But now you've got your eyes open. So you know what a professional at this level is looking for. And if that gets too overwhelming, call Tim. He'll do it on your behalf. I guess, what are some of the red flags? Like you said, strata as one of these things. But, what are some of the red flags that should make an investor pause, even if the numbers look attractive?
So for me, a big red flag is if a property has been on the market for a very long time, there is in a relatively hot market or where properties are moving, that's a big red flag. Normally there is a reason as to why the property hasn't moved. Someone else has probably done the due diligence and realized it's in a flood zone. For instance, Townsville, guaranteed after the last floods, there will be properties that now unfortunately just don't move unless they come with a massive discount. So that is probably the biggest red flag for me, is if a property's been on the market for a long time, there's probably a reason for it.
Yeah, I see this all the time in our mobile app. Actually, one of the data points we put in for consumers is days on market.
Yep.
And I always say, look, it's been on the market a long time, but it could be good or bad, right? It could be on the market because of a bad pricing campaign at the beginning.
Spot on.
But it also could be what you said, where someone has done so much due diligence, maybe 3 or 4 buyers who are serious have already discovered that there's a problem. Yeah. And now this property is on the market after 60, 90 days.
And actually, it's a great point, because you're right. A reason a property might have been on market is the vendor might have had very unrealistic expectations, set a price way too high compared to what it's actually worth, and it just sits there.
Yeah.
And the agent might have told them, oh, we can definitely get this. We can definitely get this. Just never moves. Now, that can actually be an opportunity.
That's right.
But you've got to, something I would always do for a client is, if we're looking at a particular property, you've got to look at 2 or 3 comparable properties and get a reasonable price estimate. So what the midpoint is, and then a high and low. I would never buy over the high point of that estimate.
Yep.
because you then immediately strip away your equity potential.
Yeah, you do.
Now, sometimes in a hot market, it's okay to pay towards the higher end, but you've got to understand the value.
You do. And the value is a very big part of all of these conversations, because you can win it based on so many factors, or pricing, price points, negotiations. But to be honest, like, terms win a lot of deals, to be honest, a lot of the time. So it's not always just about the price. It's about what you're offering. Is it a short settlement? Is it the settlement that they want? A lot of vendors, you might think, oh, they'll love a 30-day settlement. I can offer them 21 days. But those vendors, you got to assess what they want first.
Oh, always.
And if they want a 90 to 120-day settlement, then your 21 days sounds horrible as an offer.
Absolutely.
So there's so much.
So again, a key question for any of your listeners, and something I always ask the agent I'm negotiating with, is what are the ideal sort of terms that your vendor is looking for? One that we settled on recently, 60 days was the preference, because they've lived there for years and years and years, and they want time to find another property.
Of course.
Now, for my client, 60 days, that was absolutely fine. For other clients, maybe not. Maybe they want to move faster. But if you actually understand the goal, some people might want to move as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's right.
And the more you can, as long as it works for the client or the purchaser, the more you can align to what the vendor's looking for, the better chances you have of securing the deal.
No, I couldn't honestly agree more with that. So, and I just wanted to quickly touch on negotiation there, because I think it's important.
It's crucial.
Well, I think this is the perfect time to work into our Reddit segment of the day. There's a few things I want to unpack about it. All right. Sure. This is a very big story on Reddit that one of our listeners submitted, and it's about the building inspector missed crucial issues when they purchased. What do we do? Are you ready to have a crack?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this one reads, building inspector missed crucial issues when we purchased. What do we do? This came from the Oz Properties chat, and shout out to the person who actually submitted this, one of our listeners. It reads, we moved in our first home 1.5 months ago in Ferntree Gully. This is in Victoria. It's a townhouse unit built in 2013, and there are 8 units on this block. After the big rain on Wednesday, the roof was leaking upstairs and downstairs. The plumber came to check, and within half an hour he pointed out so many things were not sealed properly. The roof seal was actually all patchy, and it was a terrible job. The leaks were the result of this bad construction job. None of this was mentioned in the building and pest inspection when we were purchasing. It costed us $600 plus, and the guy finished the job within an hour max. He didn't even go up in the roof. If we knew about all of this, we would have been able to pull out, or at least prepare and prevent this. So many calls to useless body corporate who put us on different property management each time, and with different answers. We got a hold of their insurance broker and we lodged a claim. However, it's still unclear if this will fall under any policy that they do cover. The plumber told us to push it back and get his insurance to cover us. Tim, that's a hell of a story.
It's a hell of a minefield.
But let's take the lens. Let me try and bring it down to our topic, right? Due diligence.
Yes.
These people did the right thing. We talked about getting a building and pest. They did it. They actually went and got one. And they paid $600, which is a fair bit for a building and pest. I have so many questions for you. Treat this like a case study. When you hear the story like this, where do you think the due diligence may have broken down?
Okay, so I think we touched on this earlier in the episode around when it comes to getting a building and pest inspector or inspection done, they're not always the same level of quality. Hence why getting a referral to someone that someone knows does an excellent job is crucial. If you just go and, choose someone that you've never heard of before, but they might be the cheapest or most available is another thing, that could be a red flag. Sometimes I know the building and pest inspector I use down in Victoria, they are always so busy. I have to fight with them as to when I can get this locked in for my clients.
It's that preparation of getting it ready.
That's right. Now, that for me is a very positive thing, that I know they are great at what they do. That's why they're used by so many people. And they are definitely not the cheapest.
No.
But cheap, I would suggest, if this is going to be one of the most expensive purchases you are ever going to make, the cost of the building and pest inspection and getting it at the lowest price is not your goal. You want to make sure you're getting the best building and pest inspector to do the job for you. So that's the first thing I think is just getting the right inspector to do the job maximizes your chance of getting a really thorough report and the things getting picked up.
No, I agree. And it's really well answered. It's not just like in this case, you look at their story and you go, well, they did all the right things. But here in this case, it's the due diligence behind which professional they used. And if they felt like he only spent an hour there and he didn't go upstairs or go in the roof, I know it sucks, but maybe that's you need to try and get your money back or dispute it with them and then go get another building and pest.
So what? And it sounds like that might be too late in this particular case because it seems like I'm assuming they've settled. Now, I absolutely do think they should go back to that building and pest inspector and complain.
Yeah, 100%.
It sounds like there were some very obvious things that were missed, which are now proving to be an issue. So, and look, I'm not educated enough to know exactly how they should approach this, but a couple of things that spring to mind. Definitely go back to the building and pest inspector, put in a formal complaint. Fair trading. The Victorian fair trading, there is nothing wrong with approaching them and providing them with an overview of what's happened to get their guidance on what they would suggest.
Yep.
It sounds like they're already obviously in touch with the strata and body corporate. So the body corporate is meant to cover off on the building itself and have insurance to cover the building. So this is the sort of thing that I would definitely be focusing in on with them around how it sort of got to this state and what's going to be done to rectify it. Because the last thing you want is this to happen again in the future.
No, you don't. And these are really good points because you don't want to go through this again, not with another property or the same property and have this mess.
Nightmare.
No, absolute nightmare.
And look, I think I said earlier, it's one reason why I don't buy units for clients. And it's governed by my personal experience. I just think buying units as an investment brings an extra level of risk. And equally, from a cash flow point of view, strata, body corporate fees, all of that, everything that comes with it, in my opinion, isn't the ideal way to build a portfolio. Now, the thing of buying nationally, which is what I do for clients, is you can buy houses in different markets. If you're happy to rent vest,
you can, there's limits.
You might be able to spend the same amount of money on a house in a different market, which has great potential, compared to a unit in a major city.
Yeah, you live where you want to have lifestyle and then you rent where you get the return.
And this is where I think having someone to support you to open your eyes to a whole range of different markets and the pros and cons of investing in different markets, whether it be city, whether it be regional, can be really beneficial.
Oh, I agree. Tim, I can't believe how quick the time's flown. I don't have time for my second story on Reddit. And, I'm just going to probably call you next week and say, let's just do this together online. But because I really like that second story. I like how you answered this first one. Thank you so much for doing that.
Pleasure.
Before we wrap up, I need to bring it back to your process and how you think about this with clients, right? So, but without giving away all your IP, I think the final question I have for you, Tim, is, what's your advice to someone who's like about to be on the market today and they're like, what am I doing? How do I do this? What's your kind of final thought for them?
Yeah. So look, I would say to anyone, if you want to buy an investment property yourself, absolutely you can do it. You've just got to understand that it's going to take time. And the most important factor is having a thorough process throughout all of this. So I think what we touched on was understanding what your goals are, doing the analysis, data analysis around the markets and which markets around Australia offer you the best potential. Then when it gets down to property level, due diligence, well, firstly, understanding the market value is important. The cash flow, so you need a cash flow analysis of what's it going to cost you? What's the yield going to be? How quickly can you get that property to neutral over time and ultimately positively geared? Because positive gearing is ideally what you are striving for. And then when it comes down to the purchase, what we've touched on a lot today is due diligence.
Yeah.
So really doing thorough due diligence around the property, the suburb, the property, just to minimize whatever risk you can.
Yeah, I agree.
Ultimately, you want to get a tenant in as quickly as you can. I think having the right property managers support you can be a fundamental part of it.
I agree. Tim, thank you so much for coming back on the show today. I can't let you go without telling us your verdict on our no BS statement of the day, which was most investors don't do due diligence, they do confirmation bias. So, final verdict, is that BS or not BS?
So I'm going to say not BS.
I agree.
I think, and this is, again, my personal experience, and it's only with experience that I've learned exactly what needs to be done.
I love it. Thank you for your no BS verdict. Didn't even mean it to work out that way, so I love it. But Tim, once again, thank you so much. It was so fun to have you in person.
Great to meet you in person, Joe.
And I think this is, the start of many. I think there's so much cool stuff we can cover in future episodes together.
Absolutely.
And this was such an important follow-up from our first conversation because, episode 1 was very much about that first decision, like how to actually purchase, which decision do you make? Whereas today was about how to properly pressure test that decision before you commit. So for anyone listening, if you're looking at a property right now, here are some questions I want to leave you with. Am I looking for reasons this property works, or am I also looking for reasons that it might not? Have I checked the market, the property, the rental demand, and the cash flow properly? Do I understand the risks, or have I just accepted the upside? What could go wrong after settlement? And if this property underperforms, do I know what my next move would be?
And something I'd say, Joe, is, look, I think and I think I might have said this in the first episode, I'm happy to talk to any of your listeners that just want to reach out. If they've got questions, I'm always happy to talk to people over the phone.
Amazing.
No commitment expected at all. But yeah, just a shout out to, and if I can help in any way, get in touch.
I really appreciate that. And guys listening, take that offer up because it is invaluable to have someone that you can call and ask those questions. Ultimately, Tim just wants you not to make a mistake.
Right.
So he's like, just let me help you. So thank you for that generous offer. And again, Tim, thank you for being here. If you want to connect with Tim, ask questions, or just continue the conversation, all his details are on screen and in our show notes below. And thank you so much to all our listeners for tuning in. We appreciate all your feedback and all your, your loyalty throughout the years. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with a mate, someone who's looking to buy a property. You might need to slow them down. So this is a good episode for it. We'll see you next time on the No BS Real Estate Podcast. Bye for now. That's a wrap for this episode of the No BS Real Estate Podcast, powered by Abodi AI. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who might need it. If you're looking for more guidance on your home buying journey, you can visit www.abodi.com.au for expert advice, property insights, and the tools you need to find the right home with confidence. If you're already on your journey, you can also download our app. Just search Abodi AI on the App Store or Google Play. Have any questions or want to connect, you can follow us on Instagram at abodi.com.au or send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.